Hello, everyone. Just giving a couple minutes for folks to pile in to the waiting room or to the chat. Hope everybody's having a great Tuesday. I hope I'm coming through okay. I'm having to run the stream off of my hotspot on my phone because my internet service provider has an outage until 10:30. So please let me know if my voice is coming through clear. If you're able to hear me, I'll add the video element here in just a moment. Isn't it always just how it is with cable companies? They're like, we'll be ready sometime between 1:30 and the heat death of the universe. Good. As long as it sounds okay, I am good to continue. I'll just pop in. Hi, everybody. How's it going? Hope you're all having a wonderful day. Good. I'm glad I sound good. Glad I sound clear. So hope everybody's having a great day. We're back for the joy of game mastering, my favorite program on the channel, where we talk all about the trials and tribulations that go into becoming a tabletop role-playing game master. You know, it is one of the most important jobs in role-playing games, and it can be a little intimidating. So what we do here at this channel is sort of demystify some of the secrets, share advice, and just sort of prepare you to go out and have fun with your friends and tell great stories. Let me know if the music's too loud. I can turn it down a little bit, or I can turn it off if it's annoying. But today's topic, we are talking all about the logistical aspect of running a convention game. You know, I've talked in theory about how to design convention adventures. We have sessions about that both on Mutants and Masterminds Monday, and I believe I chatted about it here previously on the Joy of Game Mastering. I'll have to go back and double check. But today we're talking about what goes into it, from what to expect, how to submit your events, what happens during the game when you're running it, for sort of all the physical aspects of being at a convention and running a game with strangers. A lot of this advice would also be applicable for folks who are running scenarios at a friendly local game store, either a demo of a favorite game, or if you're trying out a group of people before you commit to running a campaign with them. Pretty much all that sort of stuff. So please let me know if you have questions in the chat, and I will go ahead and dive in. The first thing to consider when deciding if you want to run a game at a convention is to ask yourself if you are comfortable with performing in front of strangers. You know, there is a public speaking aspect of what we do as convention game masters. There is a very extroverted people management portion of it. You know, what are you hoping to get out of running a game at a convention? It can be something as simple as I want to get a free badge for the convention. I just want to go and play games most of the time, but I'll do the minimum amount to get to go for free. It can be I am demoing a new game and I want to try to build my audience base, or I really love one particular role-playing game that doesn't have a wide audience and I'm trying to get more people to know about it. I'm trying to raise awareness. So asking yourself sort of what you're looking to do, that'll determine sort of the size of convention you're looking to travel to, and sort of get you in the right mindset to start thinking about what kind of game you're looking for. Hello, Learn Music. Hope you're doing well. Hello, Ken Pham, RC, and Rebel Moose. Hope everybody's having a good day. Ken Pham asks, have you ever had a group that just didn't mesh with the game? What'd you do in that scenario? Yes, I have. I've had people who didn't know Mutants and Masterminds. I run mostly Mutants and Masterminds at conventions. I've run a couple other games, but Eminem's my favorite. I might be biased. And it's hard, you know, especially in a situation where you are the one unifying point for the players, because a lot of the players might not even know each other. They could all be strangers as well. It sort of falls to you to put in the energy that you want to get back, more than even in a regular gaming session. You know, if you're excited, you're passionate, you're pulling them into the story, that will help with them sort of jiving with the feeling that you're trying to get out of the story. But in situations where they just don't connect with the source material, or they couldn't find anything else to play, and this was the only thing that may have sounded interesting in the time slot, it's asking them, what kind of games do you like to play? I feel, and pausing the game for a moment to say, hey, I feel like we're having a little bit of a disconnect from each other. Can we please just chat about, can we chat about what are you looking to get out of the game? What were you expecting that what do you want to see more of? What do you want to see less of? Can we recalibrate and work together to tell a fun time for the next 4 hours? And then you always have the option to, if everybody's having a bad time and you're not having a good time, just say, hey, I don't know that this is the experience that any of us want, and maybe we just stop and we head off to do other things with our time. Yeah, Ali Gowans says convention DMing is truly a different breed. It really is. It's it's an entertainment role in a lot of ways. You become somebody who is participating in somebody's vacation. A lot of people are coming to conventions to relax and to enjoy their hobby and to get away from the world. And you become a part of that when you agree to be a convention GM. It's a very important responsibility. And it's something I take very seriously. And I hope you do as well. But after deciding what you want to get out of the game, after deciding, what size convention you're looking to go to, you head over to the convention website and you check into their submission guidelines. Every convention will have their own submission portals, generally. Sometimes it's a third-party website, such as tabletop events. They'll have specific information they're asking for you for each of the events you want to run. That will be title of the event, that'll be system, that'll be a brief synopsis of the event, generally 300 characters or less, to give a short elevator pitch about what the game is going to be about. That is where you really want to put some work in, is having a fun title, having a fun synopsis, because that's what's going to attract people to your game to sign up, especially if you're running something that's not overly popular, like Beaton's Masterminds or Age or any other system that's not quite Fire Lizards and Forgotten Lairs. You want to decide how many players you're willing to take at your table, like a maximum players and a minimum players. If you want to have an upcharge, there's often an ask for that. It'll vary from convention to convention, but some conventions don't charge anything at all for events. They just roll that cost into their badge prices. Some conventions have a baseline cost, but most conventions will allow you to charge more than the typical amount if your event has a lot of materials that you had to purchase, if you're providing something tangible for the players to take home with them. A lot of times that's a good justification for an upcharge. But generally, if you don't have a lot extra to offer, I wouldn't suggest an upcharge. You'll also have questions about the size of table that you need to run your game. If it's a round table or rectangular table, if you need an outlet nearby for your laptop or your tablet. And sometimes they'll ask if your game requires any experience to play. They'll ask, beginner, intermediate, or expert level gamer. They'll ask age minimum requirements. So if you are running a more adult game, you could say, I only want players 13 and up, 16 and up, or 18 and up, or all ages. And yeah, lots of things to consider logistically there when you're first submitting. And make sure you follow their guidelines. Everybody will have a different way of requesting certain information. They'll have a different way of notating the information. So you'll want to make sure to read those guidelines very carefully. And that is often where I begin my adventure design process, is during the submission. I'll think of the title, I'll think of the synopsis, and then I won't really touch the prep time for that for a while after that, once I have the event submitted. One of my biggest pieces of advice for a synopsis is to make sure that it's vague enough that it doesn't promise anything specific, so that when you're designing the adventure, you can work from a very vague baseline, and you can work your way up to something really exciting and specific. You want it to sound exciting, but it doesn't have to be a detailed breakdown of the entire plot, so that you have flexibility if you run out of time to prepare, or if your inspiration was one way 3 months ago when you submitted the event. Now your inspiration is a little bit different. Having some leeway in that synopsis is a lot of good. How much time do you set aside for teaching the game? I've only ever done one-shots with people that know the game, and we barely keep within time frame then. Seems like it would be harder when teaching as well. It is harder. It comes down system mastery. That's one thing that you really need to stress when you're doing a convention game, because you might be the only person at the table who knows how the game works. And it is not getting too lost in the specific details of the game. I have a very quick overview of Mutants and Masterminds that I do at the beginning of every convention one-shot, and I'll give it to you because it's only a couple of minutes. I'll say, hi, welcome to the game. Today we're going to play Mutants and Masterminds, the world's greatest superhero role-playing game. It's a very simple game. It's a D20 plus a modifier versus a difficulty number. The higher you roll, the better you do. The lower you roll, the worse you do. And it's focused on narrative action, having a lot of freedom to perform actions the way that you want, and it's a superhero game. So we'll go over your sheet real quick. The top of the sheet, you have the abilities of your character. Those are the central building blocks. You won't have to roll that very often, but it does add into all of your numbers, like your skills and stuff. Your strength is how big of a tomato you can pick up. Stamina is how poisonous a tomato you can eat. Dexterity is how accurately you can throw a tomato. Fighting is how well you can smash a tomato into somebody's face. Intellect is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Awareness is knowing not to put a tomato in a fruit salad. And presence is being able to sell a tomato-based fruit salad as salsa or ketchup. Underneath your abilities are your offenses on the character sheet. Those are your various ways to cause harm to other people. There's a number in there that has a plus next to it. You roll a d20 and add that number. And then there's a number underneath the DC column. That is how much damage it does. When we get into combat, I'll explain a little bit more how that works. But the higher your DC is, the more likely you are to harm somebody with a resistance check. Underneath that are your powers, which are various amazing abilities. We format them the following way in M&M. I'll have a fun name for the power, such as Battle Suit or Super Speed. Right next to that will be a word that is the actual effect of that power. The way powers work in M&M, we focus more on what effect you're trying to accomplish in the world, and those tend to be very self-explanatory. So there'll be things like leaping, damage, movement, protection. Look at that word if you have a question about what your power does. And then there's a number after that. That is the effect rank of that power. That won't be something you have to worry about too much, but if I ask what is the effect rank, that's where you'll look. And I'll show you when we get into gameplay if you have any questions about that. Underneath your powers are your advantages, which are things that aren't quite as awesome as superpowers. They're things that regular people tend to be able to accomplish, such as wealth or social status or combat training, anything that makes your life a little bit easier as a superhero. There is a brief sentence about what it does next to it, but if you have a question, please let me know and I will tell you how that advantage works. On the back page, we have your skills listed in alphabetical order. There is a column in the middle there that has a plus next to it. That's what you'll add anytime I ask you to make a specific skill check, or if I ask you what skill do you think is applicable to this situation, you'll pull from that list. You also have your complications on the back of this page, which are anything that make your life more difficult as a hero. These can be things like weaknesses, temperaments, motivations, relationships. Anytime those things make your life more difficult, you earn what's called a hero point. Hero points are one of my favorite mechanics in Mutants and Masterminds. It is the sort of central building block for you as a player to contribute to telling the story. Hero points can be used to reroll dice. So if you're not happy with the result, before I tell you if you succeed or not, you can spend a hero point and reroll. The cool thing about a hero point reroll is if you roll 1 to 10, you get an additional 10 to it. So you're guaranteed to at least get 11 to 20 on a hero point reroll, which means it's always better, generally speaking, to spend a hero point. And I hope some company somewhere will take inspiration from that. I'll throw a little jab in there. You can also use hero points to edit the scene. So say we're fighting poison ivy in a greenhouse. You could say, oh, look, the gardener left some herbicide out. I'm going to use that to attack our plants. Or say we're dangling over Gotham Bay from a helicopter and there's a shark attacking you. You could say, hey, Robin, look, I left the bat shark repellent up in the helicopter. I'm going to go grab that and save your life. And you can also use them to do what's called an incident counter. So if you see an effect going on that you think you have a power that can shut down, spend a hero point, we'll make an opposed check. And if you succeed, whatever bad thing is happening won't happen. And then there's some other things. I've got a cheat sheet on the table for you to review if you have questions about what other things your hero points can be used for. Hero points are earned by leaning into genre tropes, so acting like a superhero in a superhero narrative. Good descriptions, jokes I think are funny, jokes I think aren't funny, suffering complications, and I generally tend to give them out at the beginning or the end of scenes, so don't feel like you have to stockpile them. There's no prize at the end for having the most. And then I'll ask, do you have any questions? And that is everything I'll say about M&M before we start playing. I think you'll find that a lot of people tend to learn best by doing. So most people will, they'll listen politely to that spiel, but they won't necessarily retain all the information. And it's up to you as the GM to really have that system mastery to be able to adjudicate the game as it goes along. I'm a proponent of to play to intent. So if somebody is like, cool thing, ask them what their intended effect is. Like, what are they trying to actually accomplish? Are they trying to knock the person down? Are they trying to just hurt them and they want to describe it as knocking them down? And then the GM can flip that into, okay, they basically want to do a power attack, or they want to do a trip action. That way. Of them down too much in the minutia of how the system works if they're not overly familiar with or this is their first time playing. The goal is to make sure they have a really fun time, and you can do a lot of the processing work in the background without having to stop and explain everything. Some players will want to have an explanation, and so be prepared for that, or be prepared after the game to answer any questions if people have them. I generally recommend for a convention game to save yourself 15 minutes basically in the beginning to handle things like character selection if you've got pre-gens, going over the rules, just introducing yourself and having everybody introduce themselves. I do like to ask everybody, hey, who are you playing and what is your person name, so that I can refer to you correctly. And I'll jot down a little seating chart behind the GM screen so that their actual names and sort of build that rapport with them. That is a couple of steps to get into actually sitting down to run the game, but I hope that answers your question, Ken. After you submit your games, there will be a period of time where the convention will take some time to approve everything. Some conventions do this very quickly. They'll approve it and they'll schedule it. It takes a little while for them to get everything approved and get everything submitted and ready to go. So just sort of your mileage will vary based on which convention you're going to. Bigger conventions tend to have that or system organized much cleaner. Also, at this point, you will generally, once your events are all approved and scheduled, you'll generally get whatever link you need to buy your GM badge. Whether this is a system such as Gen Con, where you pay for your Gamemaster badge and they reimburse you, or Origins has coupon codes that they send to GM so that their badges are free, and they have to buy them at a special link. So instead of going through the general badge purchasing portal on their website, there's a separate one for Game Masters. You'll also want to look and see if there's any other rewards for Game Masters running games at the convention and seeing what the thresholds for that is. A lot of conventions will have a minimum threshold to get a free badge, basically, which is you'll run a certain number of games and then you'll get to go to the convention for free for the rest of the time. There are other conventions that have sort of a second or a third threshold above that, where if you run additional events on top of the minimum required, you'll earn things like food vouchers, or some conventions will do a quarter of a hotel room and they'll put you in with 3 other Game Masters. If you're part of a Game Master group, you can get 4 GMs basically together to submit enough events to get a free hotel room with the 4 of you. Or you can get put in with strangers. I've done that before. It's interesting. I got placed in I was a solo GM submitting my events, and I got placed in a hotel room a couple blocks away from the convention center with the guys who were running the My Little Pony LARP, which is really it was a really interesting experience. They were a fun group of dudes. So there's also things like you can get you might get coupons for the dealer hall. There's lots of different kinds of rewards that they might be willing to give their Game Masters. After you have your event submitted and you've looked up sort of how many games you want to run, it's time to start preparing your games. We've got other streams about how to write a convention one-shot, but basically make sure you leave yourself enough time to comfortably be ready to run the game. This can be a few months in advance if you're the kind of person who wants to run a play test with some of your friends before you do the one shot in front of strangers. Sometimes that helps people feel comfortable. It also helps people sort of work out the bugs before they sit down to run the game for the first time. And the level of prep that you do is entirely to your comfort level. If you're a person who is able to roll with the punches and is able to heavily improvise, you might not need more than the adventure synopsis. You might be able to just show up with your synopsis, your opening scene, and then just sort of go back and forth with players for your time slot until they're done. I generally don't recommend doing that if you haven't done it a lot, or if you're not super comfortable with improvising and with. But it is definitely a great option for folks who are good at that sort of thing. Otherwise, you want to decide if your game is going to offer pre-generated characters or if you are going to allow people to show up to the table with characters. I generally advise doing pre-gens unless you're doing something like Finders of Speed or a D&D Adventurers Guild, something that is an organized play where there are set rules for how characters advance and how characters move from game to game, because you don't really with like an overpowered character and you haven't had what that character is, how they get involved in the story. And when you use pre-gens, you get a lot of opportunities to really integrate those characters into the story to give natural moments for them to shine. There's sort of two schools of thought there, where either the story is very specifically tailored to the specific characters who are at the table, or it is a very general story and you have a great range of characters to choose from. I've run games both ways. I tend to prefer the ones that are focused on a specific group of people to the ones that are wide open, but I understand the appeal of the wide open ones, especially running superhero games. I mean, I've showed up to run a Justice League game and I've had 73 Justice League members available to choose from in the roster, because I want to be the kind of person who can offer, I've always wanted to play the Question or Blue Devil or Fire and Ice or Hawk and Dove in a Justice League game, but no game masters ever offered more than just the core people from the Justice League cartoon. It's cool being able to fulfill that fantasy for people. William Lang says, only DM a convention game once, and I didn't know I was going to the con until midnight of the show. That's rough. That's bananas, William. How did that go? Did you have an event ready, or were you filling in for somebody? What was that all about? I think we'll save some time for some fun con stories in the back half of this, because I have a couple of crazy situations that I've survived as a game master at conventions. So deciding what characters you want to bring, if you want to bring characters, what the rules are for character creation. The only real exception to this rule is if you're doing a demo game where you're sort of teaching a scenario. That's basically the first half of that time slot will be dedicated to creating a characters and creating, basically learning the rules, going through character creation, and then the back half of that scenario will be a very short adventure to introduce some base core mechanics of the game. That tends to be like a teaching game, which is a perfectly valid sort of convention style game, especially if you are working with a gaming company to show off their products. A lot of game companies will look for volunteer GMs to participate in their convention blocks. That's another good place to look if you're looking to get involved in GMing at conventions, but you don't want to necessarily do it all on your own or be responsible for all the submission stuff if you're not comfortable with that. You can either join up with a gaming company. We at Green Ronin, we have the Freebooter program where we empower people to run our games at conventions, especially Gen Con. And I believe OrcaCon, the Freebooters are also a pretty big presence there. There's also independent GM companies, basically game masters who band together as hobbyists and submit in one block. You tend to find at conventions there are organizations that have similar interests who work together. I'm part of a couple of groups. I'm part of Matinee Adventures, where I run a bunch of stuff at UConn in Michigan with them, and I'm running an event at Origins with them. They do a lot of superhero stuff. They do a lot of licensed like TV shows, video games, comic books, all that sort of jazz adventures that are very focused on narrative and very focused on everybody being awesome. You can find groups like the Pathfinder Society or the DM Adventurers Guild, which are in the same vein as the freebooters, where they're endorsed by a larger game company, but not necessarily members of those companies. And my Untold Stories project, the streaming network that I'm the executive producer for, we also run a GM block of events. I handle the submission of all of our events. I think we have 14 GMs for Origins this year, and we're running over 60 events. So it's a big deal. That's a great place to get started if you want to run games, but you don't want to necessarily be responsible for all of the logistical elements of it. And you can submit by yourself. I mean, when I first started running games at conventions, I was a solo GM. So I would submit events by myself. I was just responsible for my stuff and for showing up to set up my games and all that fun stuff. And it's good. William Lang says, just got home from work and my group told me we were going. Thankfully, I'm good at winging it. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, being good at winging it is very important. Rebel Moose says, when you're bringing pre-gens, are you making proxies of well-known characters? Captain America, Captain Planet, Captain Falcon. It depends. Generally, when I'm bringing pre-gens, they are the actual well-known characters, because I tend to run a lot of games that are set in well-known universes. I run a lot of Justice League, a lot of Suicide Squad, a lot of Guardians of the Galaxy. I run Harley Quinn, the animated series. I run Avengers. I've got some Avengers scenarios. I've done some Marvel Midnight Suns since I started playing the game a couple years ago, and I really had a great time, and I like the team. It's just letting people know that it is that team. And when you submit the event, I tend to title those events something like Justice League Apocalypse Now or Harley Quinn the Musical, so people know to expect those characters as the pre-generated options. If you are running custom characters, it is perfectly fine to make proxies of other characters. Take that load off of yourself, because when you have a custom character, that adds a learning curve to the role-playing that isn't present when you're running a well-known character. One of the nice things about well-known characters is players who show up generally have an idea of how that character acts, who they are, what their history is. That is information that they don't necessarily have if you're introducing a custom character. And you don't want to inundate them with a bunch of information and backstory about that custom character, because generally they won't be invested in that character until they've played them for an hour or so. And then they start, like, oh, I have this theory, I have these ideas about who this character is. I like to share a document with each of the character sheets with custom characters that is basically one page. It is at most 2 paragraphs of backstory, some personality keywords that are like, if you want to play this character, the way that they are in either the game they usually show up in or in the book series that they're a part of. This character is mysterious, they're aloof, they are in calculating, sort of getting into those just keywords to get people thinking about how to roleplay them without telling them this is how they're played. And then the bottom half of that page, I'll generally put this is this character's usual opinion of the other members of this team. I run a lot of stuff in Titan City, which is up until now just my own custom setting that not a lot of people know about, but there's a book out now, and we've released a couple of adventures here at Green Ronin, so there's more Titan City stuff on the way. So hopefully those will be well-known characters soon. But when I run Titan City stuff, I give them just that one page of information, and I'll say things like, for the Titan City Sentinels, I'll say Atlas is in a relationship with Chevron, and this is what he thinks about Chevron. Atlas used to be a rival of Professor Mysterium, and this is how they feel about each other now. And just to give those little moments to inspire role-playing. That's what this information is meant to do. You don't need to give a whole detailed description of a character, but if you can give those players hooks to latch onto for role-playing, that helps a lot. This can be in the form of those interpersonal relationships, complications. It can be something as simple as giving them a motivation on their sheet so they know this is what I would generally do in this situation. Hi, Jay Gray from Gray Matters Gamemastering. Hope you're having a great day. We're talking about convention games today, so But once you have your event, once you have your pre-gens, or you've decided that you're going to open it to people to bring their own characters, you do your prep. That prep, you decide, is this going to be theater of the mind? Is this going to rely on miniatures? Do I need a map? Do I want to bring any props? Thinking about just sort of the physical objects that you want to bring to the table. Am I going to use a Gamemaster screen for this particular scenario? Am I going to roll my dice behind the shield? Am I going to roll them in front of everybody? All of that logistical stuff that does come up in every game that you run, and making sure that you decide. I tend to go a little more all out with my convention games than I do my home games, just because I know it's a vacation experience. It is, I charge an upcharge these days, for at least for my Mutants and Masterminds events, because I'm the line developer for Mutants and Masterminds. So I figure people should probably pay a little bit extra to play with me as opposed to somebody else. And I've been doing it for a long time, and I think I'm pretty good at it at this point. So I like to bring maps. I like to bring, if I'm running a Titan City game, I'll make sure everybody leaves the game with a copy of my first book. I'll bring miniatures. I'll bring handouts. My wife has made puzzle boxes, like physical boxes for games for me in the past. I've done the aged paper thing. I've done the big canvas maps. Just anything that raises the production value of the game is going to make it stick out a little more in the memories of your players, especially if they don't know you, they just know the game that they had. Ken Pham says, what do you do, if anything, about players that take more of the spotlight and try to interact with everything before the others? That's hard. That is definitely something that you need to be able to communicate, especially with strangers. It is something that can happen. There are players who, I like to give people the benefit of the doubt, and they're just nervous about quiet time, and they're nervous about not living up to people, not making it a fun time for everybody, or they are just the people who need to be in the spotlight all the time. And I tell them, I say, our goal here is to tell a story together. I want all of us to be able to contribute equally in the manner that you want to. I want you to be able to, I appreciate that you are invested and you're energized, but consider letting somebody else take this moment because their character is a little better suited for it. It's just being very upfront and being very communicative, not confrontational, but saying, hey, you've been in the spotlight for a little bit. Can we please let somebody else in? This is not really meant for this kind of character. Jay Gray mentions a talking stick system, which is, if you have a lot of people who are all talking over each other, a talking stick can be important. And I find that I often think while I'm running games that generally I don't like to leave any player sitting quietly for longer than 10 minutes. I want to sort of switch focus, especially if the party's split up. M&M is prone to party splits because the character is a lot more powerful than traditional fantasy role-playing game characters. So when the party is split up, I like to keep it to two splits, two sort of evenly split groups, and then bounce back and forth very quickly between them to make sure that everybody is still engaged, paying attention. And then if a situation comes up where both of those groups are in a combat, I will just roll it as one big initiative count, and I'll have them on two separate maps for their fight. But I'll run it basically as one connected combat, just in two separate locations. So I'm not resolving one situation, then resolving another situation, and then hopefully bringing everybody back together. So yeah, it's just being communicative. It's being willing to say, hey, I appreciate what you're doing. I'm the game master. Please, if somebody has a question, they can ask me. If somebody, don't tell people how to play their characters, and don't feel like you have to be involved everywhere. I promise everybody will get an equal amount of attention, or the amount of attention that they want. Because you look at some players who are not really, if you put them on the spot, they get uncomfortable. Or if you shine the spotlight on them, they get uncomfortable because they're really just there to have a good time with their friends, or they're sort of just like that social wallflower kind of role player where they're like, I'm here to fight. I'm here to, I'm enjoying the social aspect of this, but I'm not necessarily somebody who needs to be up front making all the decisions or doing all the talking. So it's a lot of reading people. It's a lot of body language, which is what made it so hard running a lot of games online over the last few years. William Lang says Titan City campaign book soon. I hope so too. I can't say much about that, but I'm excited. Jay Gray says, not in a paid game, but I've ran a situation where I've given focus tokens to players to expend to get focus on their character for a duration. Players use their tokens to make impact actions. That's pretty neat. I've never heard of that, but that is interesting to give everybody a chip or something that guarantees that they can take the spotlight if they need it, or they feel like it's a situation where they haven't done anything for a while. I could see it maybe leading to some people exploiting it or being being obnoxious about it, but I like it conceptually. Matinee Adventures, that group I was telling you guys about earlier, that I run games for their 10-year anniversary, they handed out a black poker chip to everybody who played one of their games that year. And those black poker chips are able to be used at any Matinee Adventures table. You show up and it's basically either an extra hero point if you're playing Mutants Masterminds, but it's like a superhero point where you can really do something really cool with it. And generally, the GMs and the consortium have agreed that if black chip comes out, it is, do something really awesome. I can think of an example at UConn last year. I was running my Gotham City Misfits game, and the Misfits were attempting to steal an experimental spacecraft from Ferris Air during its unveiling, in which Green Lantern was there to showcase everything. And they're a bunch of like PL5 loser villains. Like one of them is Weather Wizard's Roomba, who gains sentience and wants to conquer the world for his father, and one is Condiment King. And they did the natural thing of Condiment King running a catering service, and they infiltrated the fair that was going on where the aircraft was being displayed. And he set it up earlier on. He was like, I make sure to feed Green Lantern. I make sure he gets a burger. I make sure he gets a hot dog. I make sure he gets all this stuff. And then when it was time for them to basically set off the ambush and run and go steal the ship, he spent his black chip and he was like, Green Lantern has food poisoning now and he's incapacitated. And I thought that was so hilarious that I let it go. It cut off like 20 minutes of the game because I planned for there to be a fight in that moment. But it was so well foreshadowed and so exciting that I was like, that's perfect. Yeah. Green Lantern is puking and not able to focus on stopping you guys from stealing that ship at the moment. And that's the thing to remember, convention games are not, this is not a live or die situation. It is not an ongoing campaign. It's not meant to be super serious. You're just trying to have a good time and tell a story with people who don't know you. You want to have that spirit of camaraderie and zaniness, and as long as that's the tone you're looking for. And I would advise you to expect a level of laid backness from the players who are showing up for convention games. Even if you're running horror games, the players at conventions tend to be there just to chill and have a good time, and they'll be really relaxed. They'll get into like a rhythm of good role playing, and they're not there necessarily to have those big dramatic moments as much as they are to have a good time. Some players will be there to have, the big, we're all crying at the table together. It just varies from scenario to scenario. But in general, I would expect your convention players to be much more laid back and a little wacky compared to your ongoing groups. Once you're done with your prep and you've started organizing your props and you've got everything situated, you got to figure out where you're going to stay for the convention. So a lot of conventions have hotel blocks where you can sign up for a discounted hotel room if you're interested in staying in a hotel near the convention. If you live in the same city as the convention, you can always commute down to the convention center or the hotel or wherever it's being run. And you want to make sure that logistically you can carry everything that you need for the convention for the day. If you have a hotel room, you can generally take stuff back to the room after you're done running the game before you move on to your next event for the day. But if you're coming from home, you want to make sure you have like a sturdy backpack, or I've seen people with wagons, something that will let you schlep your stuff out of the parking garage and up to the room where you're going to be running your event. I'd also recommend before you get fully into the convention for the week, picking up one of the convention maps and figuring out where each of your events is going to be hosted. A lot of conventions dedicate a certain space to role-playing games. So there might be a set of rooms, like a set of conference rooms at the hotel business center. It can be a ballroom. It can be a specific, walled-off space in the wider convention center. But wherever it is, make sure you know where you're going to be, how long it takes you to get where you're going, and I generally advise you to be setting up your game about an hour to 30 minutes before the time slot begins. It looks good on you if you are the first person there and you're set up. It shows the players that you've got your act together. You're going to be you're at least an organized game master, if nothing else. And it tends occasionally that there will be players who show up even that early, like they've got time in between their last event and your event, so they picked up some food and they're waiting at the table for you. They're eating, they're just sort of taking up, just hanging out where the next game is going to be. And don't be afraid to if you're still like getting yourself mentally ready for the session you're about to run, it's not rude to be like, hey, I'm excited that you'll be in my game. I'm gonna keep focusing on getting everything ready and set up, and I'll be a little more social when the time comes. Or if you're comfortable multitasking, you can just start chatting with that person. And that is something else to keep in mind. Your players will either be early or they'll be late. There are very few players who are on time. I shouldn't say on time. If you consider 15 minutes early on time, there's a lot of people on time. There's not a lot of people who are going to be showing up on the moment of the event. So if your event starts at 1, sort of expect your players to start showing up around 12:30 to 12:45, or they're going to be 10 minutes late and running on gamer time. That's not always their fault. Sometimes there's a long line at the food court. Sometimes they had trouble getting from one end of the convention center to the other end. A lot of conventions have a set rule that you're supposed to wait until 10 minutes after the hour before you start. So, or once everybody who has a ticket for your event is there, you can get started. Every convention is going to have a different situation for their ticketing. Some conventions will do pre-registration for events, so they will allow people to sign up for events prior to the convention starting, so you'll have time to, you'll know how many people you're expecting. Sometimes they'll give you a list of names of people you'll be expecting. Some conventions don't have pre-registration at all. Typically, if you're running RPGs at something like a comic book convention or a pop culture convention, you'll be put in a room with a bunch of other RPG game masters, and you'll just sort of have to try and pick people off as they walk by to see if they want to come play your game. That's not an experience I enjoy. I had to do that at GalaxyCon in Columbus last year, and that was not what I'm used to. It was difficult, and it was a very different situation. I'm used to running like sold out games with 5 to 7 players. When I was having to sort of go up and ask people to come play with me, I would get like groups of 2 or 3 at most, and that was so weird. I was in the same room as D&D and Pathfinder as well. So a lot of people were there, to play D&D. And I was like, I know you want to play D&D with the character you brought from home, but I've got Wolverine. Do you want to play X-Men instead? So, definitely look up if they have a pre-registration system, because pre-registering takes a lot of stress off of you as the GM, because that handles the sign-up portion of it. And it gives you a chance to really sell the event with the synopsis, with the title. When everybody shows up, you want to make sure that you have a system in place for character selection. If you've got pre-generated characters, there's a couple of different schools of thought for this. You either have everybody sort of pick all at the same time. This works really well if there's no conflict. Like if everybody is like, I want to play this character, or somebody's like, I'll pick whoever's left over when everybody else picks. Yeah, and you let them sort of work it out themselves. If there is conflict, I tend to resolve that with a dice roll. I'll be like, hey, just roll off for it. Or do any of you have a second character that you would be willing to play? You know, who's more invested in playing this specific character? Gray Matter says, I honestly don't know if I'd be able to run a con game. I have a hard time with in-store games. I run games at the library and online fairly often at this point. It's not for everyone. You know, it's a different animal than running games, even in store and at the library. You know, a convention is a high intent audience and it is a high experience audience, and they have, you know, they're there to have a really good time, and there is pressure there. There is definitely pressure on you as the game master to provide a good time. You know, it is something for everyone. You know, it is everybody's responsibility to make sure the game is fun, but in a convention game, you are the only thing that you can really account for in that equation, unless you have a roster of players who keep coming back to you year after year. And I have that. That's a luxury I have, is I've spent the last 12 years building a steady roster of players who enjoy my games, who I see at these conventions, you know, once or twice a year, who remember what I'm like and who know that they get to show up to my game and we're all going to have a good time together. Until you get to that point, you're dealing with a lot of strangers. Or if you're going to a new convention for the first time, like I went to Gen Con for the first time a couple years ago, and I've been, you know, it's hard. It's, you know, it's something to think about. Hi, Claude. Good to see you. Claude is running on gamer time. William Lang says, cons actually are more fun for me if I'm working. Worked cons all over for 10 years, always had a blast. I'm the same way. I really enjoy running games at conventions. I get a lot of energy from it. I get a lot of experience. I get a lot of, you know, I get to play with new people, and I get to see new perspectives on how to solve problems. And I get to play with people I don't generally get to play with. You know, and that could be good and bad. You know, it just depends on it depends on the luck of the draw a lot of the time. But one way that I have guaranteed that I know I'll generally have a good time is by running the game myself. I've had situations in the past where I've had GMs I didn't click with, or GMs who I didn't feel like took the level of preparation or respect into their con experience that made it hard to play. Hodgepodge Syntaxia, hello, good, thank you for joining us, asks, how often do players show up to your games with pre-mates? When I ran convention D&D, it happened often, so I'm curious. That is definitely going to happen a lot more often with D&D than it is with other RPGs. D&D and Pathfinder, I should say. A lot of people who do play D&D and Pathfinder at conventions are there because they want to be part of organized play. They want to have a history with their character, and they want to see their character grow from event to event to event. And that can be because they don't have a regular group at home. It can be because they are more invested in their specific character, and they want to have that long-lasting stakes of everything. But I'm very clear, and when I submit my events, which events have entirely all materials are provided by the Game Master, and I have pre-gens for everyone, and when I'm willing to accept new characters. You know, it's something you want to communicate up front for sure, and be willing to understand that some people might be disappointed if they have to play a pre-gen, and they might drop out of the game if they have to play a pre-gen, and that's fine. You know, you don't need everybody at the table to have a good time, and everybody is there to have. Everybody's looking for something at a convention, and you don't have to be everything to everyone. That's the important thing to remember. Gray Matter says, some people set up their games through my website, and they're almost always people that know me and have been with me for years now in games. It is, yeah. It's different running for strangers. It really is. Especially, you know, I've read a lot of game theory. I tend to be able to anticipate what a lot of players are looking for from gaming. So if you don't have that level of experience, if you don't have that depth of knowledge and sort of those there's a lot of instinct. There's a lot of intuition that is built up with experience when it comes to running a game. If you're not ready for that, it's totally fine. There's no pressure to go and run a convention game. William Lang says, I always have a folder of pre-gens just in case people pop in during my normal games. Yep. I'd like to experience a con game sometime, and Claude is excited to run convention games. Claude is running games with me at Untold Stories Project at Origins next week. I'm very excited to get to hang out with Claude in person next week. Claude also says, the only thing I'm not super pleased with is that I won't have any player character art. That is definitely something to consider in your preparation time, is where you're going to source your art from. I have a group of artists that I work with to supply my art. I pay them to create character art for, especially the Titan City stuff. I use an artist named Savannah Six, who's awesome, and I've worked with a guy named Cody Conyers in the past who does great work. You can find both of them on I think they're both on Instagram right now. I'll go track down their handles, and I'll share them in the comments below after the stream's over. But they've got great rates. They've got great turnaround times. If you are looking with custom characters, I definitely think it's a great idea to pay an artist to create art for it. Or if you're using well-known characters, you can always source art from comic books or movie stills or anything like that. Or if you're running games that involve a collection of just sort of normal people, something like an FBI agent game or something, you can pick actors and use actors' likenesses for your character art. Claude also says, I imagine for M&M it's tougher to allow characters they've made, since you have to review their build and make sure it's not busted as hell. Yeah, definitely. It's M&M is any system that is a point by customization can be exploited. That's not the intent of Mutants and Masterminds, but there are people who play with that intention. So keep an eye out for that. If you are going to run M&M, I generally recommend using pre-gens or using the quick start character build in the Basic Heroes Handbook or the Deluxe Heroes Handbook to create a character with the stat blocks in there instead of a free range character. KenFam asks, do I use playmats or is it all theater of the mind? That is entirely up to preference. One of the things I like for convention games in particular is to use playmats, not necessarily tactical battle maps, but a printed out image that sets a mood. It can be a map. I play a lot of M&M, so I don't generally worry about how many squares are on a map because most characters can move as far as they want to move around the world in 6 seconds. But it helps some people zero in on, this is where something is, these are the things in the environment that I could pick up and use. And for some people, that inspires their creativity in a way that theater of the mind can be hard for. I also find that playmats add a level of production value to a convention game. At least a perceived level of production value. People show up and they're like, oh, there's a map here. The GM is probably ready. The GM has put some time and some thought into what's going to happen. But both are completely valid. And if you're more comfortable with theater of the mind and you're good at giving vivid descriptions, it depends. It also depends on how much prep time I have before the convention starts, because if I'm out of prep time, I don't worry about maps. Claude says, I lucked out recently getting a group of strangers from random places online together for an M&M, and the game ended up going great. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm glad that you found good strangers. Good strangers are hard to come by these days. Wish I could do other art, but if it's beyond incarnate and design, it just isn't going to happen. Yeah, art's hard, and it is expensive. It's not, and it's important to remember to do anything in gaming in moderation, to the level that you expect it to. I pay for art because it does double duty for me with Titan City stuff. I can use it in promotions books. I can use it in upcoming source books and adventures. So if I pay for art for Titan City stuff, it is going to get multiple functions. It's not just going to be a one and done deal. it's budgeting. It is making sure that you don't spend everything, having just this great time at the convention. That's just good convention advice in general, is to make sure you have a budget and give yourself a little bit of wiggle room, because you're probably going to go over it in the dealer hall. There's a lot of fun stuff to buy. There's a lot of fun stuff to demo, and it's a very exciting environment to be in. So yeah, people show up to the table, character selection, ask everybody if there's any conflict between characters, have them roll for it. I also I don't do a first come first serve system for character selection. I don't like to let people pick characters until everybody is there, so that they have a chance to all discuss about who they want to play. Just because I've had experiences in the past where I signed up for a group of unknown characters, and by the time I got to the table, the character I really wanted to play was gone, and there wasn't really anybody else I wanted to play. So that made for a rough game for 4 hours. Gray Matters says, I can't imagine not using some of my well-played one-shots for cons. I have dozens of one-shots that I prep for being able to run wherever. Yeah, definitely. And there's nothing. I have a con event database too. I've got 50 one-shots that I've got ready to go at a moment's notice to run at a convention if I get asked to come out and be a guest of the convention, like an industry guest, or if I'm going to a convention for the first time that I've never been to, I will use some of my events that I think went really well from previous conventions, just to get off on the right foot with the new convention. If it's first come first served, Bothman will always go first. It's true. Michael Matsuzaka, thank you for joining us. Says, the only con I've ever been to went past my budget because I was a dummy and brought my card instead of cash. Yeah, it can be expensive. It's a great time. It's a vacation. So budget for it like a vacation. It's make sure that you have money for that is money that you will be spending on games. It's money that you'll be spending on food. You'll be dining out a lot, more than likely. Or if you're eating at the convention center, you're going to get a little bit overpriced food, like you would at any convention center. And check ahead the city you'll be going to see what is available around the convention center. Pick a couple of restaurants, pick a couple of bars, pick a couple of places that you want to try out while you're there, to make sure you're not always eating at the convention center. I always recommend that Game Masters bring snacks, preferably something without peanuts in it, just because there's a lot of peanut allergies these days, but something that is light and will give you a little bit of energy if you're running. Even one event is a lot. 4 hours of GMing is a lot for anybody. Claude says, I just foraged the local flora and hunt the local fauna. I mean, that'll work. You're gonna get a lot of raccoons in Columbus. Gray Matter says 50. Dang, that is a number I definitely see as a well-established public GM. I've been doing it for a long time, and I run a lot of games at every convention. Like at Origins, I'll be running 9 events, and there's been Origins past where I've run 13 events, and not every event I run winds up in the database. Some events I run where I thought it was going to be different than it was, and it doesn't wind up being quite the experience I wanted it to be. Once everybody has their characters, you are free to dive into the game. I always give that time at the beginning to give a brief overview of the rules, no more than like 5 or 10 minutes. And then I jump into the first scene of the adventure, and then we're off. I like to take a break in the middle of the game. Especially when I'm designing my scenarios, I like to have sort of a climax point that we can hit sort of a cliffhanger near the middle, so that people can get up and go to the bathroom. They can refill their water bottles. I can take a break from speaking because I've been talking over and over and over again for the last 2 hours. And sometimes I need a minute to think about what's going to happen at the end of the adventure, because they've gone completely off the rails of what I thought was going to happen. And now I've got to sort of scramble and think about consequences and things like that. So it's cool. It's build in that time for the break in the middle, build in that time at the beginning to explain the game and to do character selection and to introduce everybody to one another. And then I'd like to end the scenario 15 minutes or so 15 to 5 minutes before the end of the time slot, just because some people might have another event right after this one and they've got to run to it, or it might just be there might be another game master who needs your table after that. It just depends. You want to make sure that you are respectful of other people's time, which sometimes I have trouble with. Sometimes I run over because either the group I'm playing with, I'm having just a really good time with them and I'm enjoying the vamping that they're getting into. I think they're, I like the role playing that they're doing. I don't want to interrupt it. But then we start running out of time. And when we get towards like the last 30 minutes of the time slot, and I know that we're out of time, and we're not near one of my nestled endings, because I'm a big fan of Russian nesting doll endings. I'll talk about that in a second. But I'll say, I'm having a great time with you guys. I know we are getting close to our time slot. Do you have anything else that you need to do right after this? Do you want to continue on until we get to the end of this? Or do you want me to sort of just give a brief explanation of what happens at the end of the story? And generally, players, if they're having a really good time, they'll be like, you better not end this story early. We'll wait here as long as we need to. But some people have things that they have to do right afterwards. Some people, they've got plans. Ken asks, how much time do you normally get? That is up to you. You get to submit how many hours you want your time slot to be. I'm a big proponent of 4-hour time slots for games at conventions. Generally, you're looking at a 2-hour game or a 4-hour game, but there are some that go longer. There are some that go on odd-numbered hours. It just sort of depends on how much time you think you need to tell your story. I've always done 4-hour events because that seems to be the norm. So keep that in mind when you're submitting your event. Hodgepodge asks, when you've got props, how often do you find you need to set them aside because the player's going off the rails? I find that happens fairly often with Call of Cthulhu. That has happened to me before, where either they missed the prop or they have come up with a theory that is better than what I wrote in the prop, and now that clue will make their theory invalid, and that theory is better than what I came up with, so I want that to be the truth. I will just set that prop aside. This is particularly true for things like diary entries or confession letters. Generally, anything that is expository in nature, if that exposition is in conflict with what I think is a better version of the story, I'll just hold that aside and I won't show it to them. One of my big Game Master adages is that nothing is true until the players have seen it. And even then, it might not be true. The players don't know the script, and that is something that you can always take comfort in, especially if you're improvising, especially if you feel like you don't know what's going to happen and things are going off the rails. If you feel like you're doing a poor job, you're probably not doing a bad job. If your players are having a good time, you're doing a great job, and they don't know what was supposed to happen. And as long as you don't say what was supposed to happen, they'll just think that you're a great GM. Let them do as much of the work as they want to for you. Gray Matter says everything in the game is able to essentially be dragged and dropped to be wherever and whenever needed. Yeah, I'm a big fan of modular game design and expandability. The Russian nesting doll ending that I was talking about, especially with something that I know is a strict time slot, I will build 2 to 3 potential ending states of the game. Whether that's the final boss battle, if they end that too quickly, the boss has a final form, or the boss was a load-bearing boss and now the base is exploding and they have to escape, or something that gives you leeway to end the story in a natural place, but also gives you a chance to add more if you need more time. I like to be as close to that 4-hour spot as possible, especially when I charge an upcharge for an event, because in my mind, that person is paid for 4 hours of content, and I want to make sure that they get that amount of fun out of it. Hi, Tempo. Good to see you. Claude asked, do I have a sort of intro script that I use for the intro/expectations bit of the game? I do. I actually did that at the beginning of this recording, so if you want to head back and check it out, I introduce myself. I introduce the game we'll be playing. I like to make this 5 to 10 minutes for me to introduce myself, a brief overview of the rules, and then have the players introduce themselves to me. I always tell people, hi, my name's Alex. I'll be your game master today. We're here to have a great time. I hope everyone is, I hope you're having a great con so far. I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. I've been a game master for 22 years now, and I've been a convention GM for 12, and I love this convention, and I love this game. Some things to know about me as a game master: I'm very much a play to intent and a rule of cool kind of GM. If you tell me you want to do something cool, I'll figure out how to make the rules do it. Like, we're here to just have fun. It's not that, it's not that serious. Tempo says, I personally think game mastering. Tempo says, I personally think game mastering should be a cooperative process where both game masters and players can agree on mutual beneficial terms. Yes, definitely. It's a group activity. It is, we're meant to be having, we're meant to be telling a story together, and we're all responsible for us to have a good time. William Lang, I usually start from the perfect ending, then expand my options from there. Perfect. Hodgepodge, do I intentionally prep 1 to 2 flex encounters that you can easily add or remove from games to adjust the runtime, or you adjust on the fly as needed? I do a combination of those. Basically, having a couple of extra scenes in my pocket that work to add or remove time is always good. Although I tend to find that when I do those flex encounters, I'm a little vague on the details so that I can insert them just about anywhere. I don't commit overly to a specific kind of, it's not a combat with a specific villain and minions. It is, there's a combat here in this location, and then I'll fill in whatever villain seems like the appropriate one from the story that they've been telling so far to fill into that spot. You get ability there. Gray Matter Gaming says a great example of how I look at ending states, as you put it, is similar to how Sword Chronicle describes possible events when a house history is the first event. Yeah, Sword Chronicle has a lot of really good rules in it. I think there's a lot of fun game theory that you could apply to just about any scenario in there. I highly recommend checking out Sword Chronicle. I did that at the beginning of this recording. Wait, all that Spectrums stuff is part of your script? Yeah, actually, as a matter of fact, it is. Gray Matter Gaming says, almost any point in my notes have a note for how it can be used for the ending scene. Awesome. Probably already covered, but I'm guessing a little foldable nameplate for players, characters, and pronouns. Yes, I think that is a great thing to have. Especially if I'm bringing pre-gens, I will do a table tent that has that character's art on it, as well as some information that I might need to know as a GM. I'll put their dodge, parry, toughness, fortitude, will, and their initiative and insight and perception on the front sheet that I can see, so I can make secret rolls if I need to make secret rolls for things. And I don't have to ask, what is your initiative modifier if there's a tie in initiative, or what is your defense? So I don't have to get into that. What's the difference between dodge DC and my dodge score? I can just sort of fill that information in as we're going. Michael Matsuzaka says, I was running a game for 2 internet randos, but one has since disappeared. How would you feel about letting the one player finish without the other? I'm losing me sure the second isn't coming back. I would check with the other player and see how they feel. If everybody's having a great time with the story, then I would, if that person's gone, they're gone. I would get the closure on that story with the other player. I've been in that situation before where I had a campaign that I was really invested in, and a couple of the players didn't, they just weren't jiving with it, and they just didn't want to come back and finish it. But the other players were invested in seeing what happened, so I did finish up. Running games with only one player can be interesting. It has its own complications to consider. Artisan Bowtie just arrived, hoping to multitask and glean some insight while also building a Jim Henson style puppet. That's awesome. Is the puppet for a game, or is it just you just making a puppet? Yeah, I'm sorry about it, Artisan. You actually came just about near the end of the program. I wanted to get a little extra time in today for everybody since I missed last week. Tempo asks, for mutants and masterminds, their age. I mean, the character descriptions and portraits for which system and game. Can you expand on your question a little bit, Tempo? I bring character descriptions and portraits for every game that I run, regardless of system. But the information I put on the front of the table tent is different depending on the system, obviously, because age doesn't have dodge and fortitude and the same numbers as M&M. But I believe the concept of the character description and portrait is universal for any game system. You want to keep your description down to 1 to 2 paragraphs. Leave some character adjectives for how that character's personality is generally, and also letting the player know that this is just a suggestion. You can play this person however you want, but if you want some guidelines for how to play, there we go. And then I include at the bottom of that a list of their teammates and what they think about them. Tempo. So your pre-gens could be used in any system. Their backstories and their portraits can, yeah. But I tailor the pre-gens for the event that I'm running. So if it is an M&M event, I include the let me see if I can pull up a picture of what I do. I keep the backstory page separate from the character sheet so that I don't have to make a new backstory page for every character sheet. Let me see where yeah, okay. I'll share my screen real quick. Present. So this is the custom sheet that I use for my Titan City games. I'll include a character portrait on the sheet, on the front of the sheet, lay out their stats as needed. I also laminate these so they're sort of like character placemats instead of just general character sheets. And then the backstory page is this guy back here. So get into a couple small paragraphs. What the character's name is, their archetype, so the half-giant bartender, just to give people an idea of what this person is at a glance, and then what the role in the party is. He's a powerhouse and a brick. And then I don't actually have the teammate opinions on the list on this PDF in particular, but that's how I'll lay out the sheets. Basically, the backstory and the opinion of the other characters will be the front and back of page 2, and then page 1 will be the character sheet, front and back. Karsh says, came in to get some kanji I'm learning, but if you're finishing soon, I'm here to support and click like. Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, and there was a lot of great discussion in this last hour and almost hour and 15 minutes or so. And if you have any questions, Karsh, please feel free to put them in chat. I'll see if I can answer them. Claude, the character is not named after the maker of Savage Dragon intentionally, but I was told recently that Eric Larson is a famous comic book writer. Gray Matter says, could always have the descriptions of pre-gens be based on rumor instead of hard set fact. Makes it in universe then too. Yeah. Michael says, looking at this makes me feel bad about scrawling my character data on wrinkled notebook paper. There is nothing wrong with a notebook paper character sheet. I use that all the time for my home stuff. The Deuce says, Alex learned about subconscious naming recently. Yeah. Gray Matter says, that's how I see classes and archetypes anyway. They're examples of how people that don't know a person will describe a character. Yeah, generally. Yeah, and it's fun using an unreliable narrator to share information with the players, whether that is in their actual backstories, and it's from the perspective of the player, of that character. So it's not a subjective opinion. Claude says, I left my pre-gen semi-undefined to let people fill in some attributes. That's a great option too. I tend to run a lot of games with well-known characters, so it's not something I do super often. But starting just sort of with a set of powers and then having the players fill in the details is a great sort of compromise between bringing their own character and strictly playing a pre-gen. And the scenarios you're running at Origins, I think they're well suited to that kind of character for sure. If you leave it open, always need to see how someone else plays it. Yeah. Yep. And I even with well-known characters or pre-gens, if I use well-known characters, I don't expect them to play them any certain way. There's not a right way to play any character, even if they're a character I came up with. It's everybody's there to have a good time. Tempo asks, which games do you find it the easiest to game master? Personally, for me, it's Mutants and Masterminds. That's a bit of a skewed data for me, but there's a, I've been running it for a long time. I'm the line developer. I have the rules in my bones. But the kinds of games that are the easiest to game master are the ones that are very narrative, in my opinion. Games that have the option for really cinematic action and aren't as bogged down in the minutia of running the game. There's some people who love that stuff. I mean, there are games like Twilight 2000 and Hackmaster and Shadowrun that are fun in spite of the rule systems, in my opinion. Just because I don't like anything that is... I don't like having to roll 65 d6. I wasn't a Champions player. I skipped Champions. The ones I find difficult to game master are the ones that have a lot of moving parts, but are also very rigid. So there's not a lot of flexibility. There's not a lot of flexibility to the GM's ability to adjudicate things from moment to moment. And that's just a difference of game master style. Some people love that stuff. Some people love the rigidity. I like having the ability to sort of toggle the drama as needed that more flexible game systems offer. But it comes down to what you're into. I mean, Champions is fun. But it is a ton of work. Gray Matter asks, I wonder how you could easily create accessibility to music for a con game. I would recommend, if you're going to incorporate environmental aspects like music or low lighting, to make sure that your game is in a private room, which is not going to happen very often. One of the tough realities of running a game at a convention is that you will be in a room with 5 to 6 other groups that are running a game. At a minimum, 5 to 6 other groups that are running a game. So everybody will be in there all trying to play a game at the same time. And it's a little bit like running a game in a subway station. And adding music into that environment can be a little uncourteous to your neighbors who are also trying to run their games. But there are some situations where you'll be in a room by yourself. If you're running an event late at night, there's a good possibility of that. If you are running a game in a private room, some companies will put you in private rooms, or you can pay some conventions to put you in a private room. Yeah, you might be able to do earphones. You'd have to find a way to sync it up for everybody to hear it at the same time. That would be, and then still also be able to hear you. Yeah, Age is simple to run. Claude says I'd lose it if a con GM told me I was playing a character's personality wrong. That's not what Captain Boomerang would do. Yeah, I try not to have expectations for how characters are going to be played. Shadowrun's a nightmare to GM smoothly, fun to play though. Yeah, I think I've said this on Mutants and Masterminds Monday, but Shadowrun is a setting in desperate need of a game. William Lang says, as for easy, Icons, Fate Accelerated, Easy, D6 are very easy to prep. Yeah, Powered by the Apocalypse games are also really easy to do. Things like, Dungeon of the... no, what's that called? Shadow of the Weird Was... the games that... Now I gotta look it up. Powered by the Apocalypse. I feel bad, because I was... things like Blades in the Dark, Monster of the Week, Shadow of the Weird Wizard. They just had a Kickstarter, and I was just... the developer and I were both just guests at UConn. I can't remember what the game's called right now. You guys probably know. Fantasy Age is also easy to run. Master the Game RPG says, I tried to run a game at a convention once. Nobody showed up. I was bummed since I was looking forward to it. That sucks. Yeah, it happens sometimes. It could just be that there weren't enough players for a particular time slot if it was a smaller convention. It could be that, depending on what you're trying to run, it could be that some people, I think it was D&D, I think I saw in the comment lower. Even prepped a D&D game thinking to get more players. I won't compromise my system choice in the future. Yes, I definitely recommend not compromising your system choice in the future. D&D is a weird one because a lot of people will play D&D with the Adventurers League, but they won't play independent D&D as much. And a lot of people don't play D&D at conventions at all because we have D&D at home. It's sort of that's an attitude a lot of people have. Spotify music jams, yeah. I love music. Music's good. I love atmosphere, ambiance, all that good stuff. It's just hard to do at a convention. Yeah, Master of the RPG, UConn in Michigan. Don't forget Forged in the Dark, yep. Still working on getting together my in-person GM's kit before running con games. I'm not local to southeastern Michigan. I'm in Columbus, but I go to UConn every year because I have some friends up in Ypsilanti and Ann Arbor. And UConn is a great convention. I think it's a wonderful. It's one of my favorite conventions because it's not 10,000 people, but there's still a lot of good RPGs to play. Went to Saline High School. Currently live just outside Grand Rapids now. Awesome. Yeah. Well, if you're at UConn this year, let me know. I'm planning on being there and running games. Need someone to talk me how to play HeroClix at the con for my wallet's sake. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Somebody should have talked me out of playing Warhammer 40k for my wallet's sake. Yeah, Deuce says, play what you're passionate about makes it more fun for you and the player. People playing with you, that care shows through. Yeah. And Garrett Gray Matter says, even in-person table games I run have 2 tablets available for use of VTT tools. Yeah. It was hard getting back into in-person gaming after being on VTTs for a few years during the pandemic. Because I got used to the tools. I got used to the maps. I got used to the music. I got used to being able to just drag a PDF into a place when I needed it. Yeah, Matt, you should definitely check it out, Master. It's a great time. It's a wonderful convention. I think it's in October this year instead of November. Game in town the weekend it usually is. Car says I had my partner talk me into spending more money at the last con I went to. Yeah, partners can do that. I'm definitely an enabler. Don't go shopping in the dealer hall with me. I'll be the person who's like, yeah, you're at the convention, just do it. I also really want to try Blades in the Dark, William Lang. I think it's a ton of fun. There's also a game where you play in the dark and you have candles that burn down as your game mechanic. I think that's a ton of fun. And I want to play oh shoot, what's the Jenga Tower game? Doom? What's that? Learn Music says I started GMing in 2020, did it for 3 years, and I've only run 2 games in person. Yeah, it's a completely different animal. Running between in person and online. Dread is the name of the Jenga Tower game. Basically, instead of rolling dice, it's a horror game, and anytime you do something life-threatening, you pull a tile out of the Jenga tower, and if the tower topples over, your character dies. And it's spooky. It's a good time. I like anything that adds a tactile element to a role-playing game. All right. Well, does anybody else have any final questions about con games? What to bring, what to prepare, what to think about before we get out of here for the evening? Judge Dredd game win. I've got too many games to run right now anyway. My anxiety prefers online. Also, making digital assets are so much easier. Yeah. Have I ever tried GMing for AI? Character AI is particularly odd because it's already trying to RP, and another level of that confuses it to all heck. I've never tried GMing for AI. I've heard that people have tried playing for AI GMs, and I feel confident about my job security with the way they are right now. It's a very interesting technology. There's I think it's dangerous for artists, and I think that it is not good for writers or creative types. But I also think there's not a lot we can do to make it go away. I think a lot of companies are going to be adopting it, and I think we'll be brushed aside no matter how much we protest. I am a big fan of human creators, and I'm also an advocate for the advancement of technology. I wish the AI was doing the jobs we don't want to do so we can make art instead of the other way around. Car says, the last con I went to had a secondhand stall. People sell off their old RPG and board games. Yeah, I found too many good collector's books, definitely. Oh, Moose says, thanks for all the advice. Learn Music says, just want to say thanks for the stream. It was very informative. Good, I'm glad. Well, as for news around Green Ronin, I know Thursday we should be back with Thurs Age. With more advice about the age system in particular. Yes, Rebel Moose, I'm going to share a link in the description, in the comments of this video on YouTube. So give me a minute to go track down the link and I'll share it. If not tonight, I'll share it tomorrow. Tomorrow night, I will be back over on twitch.tv/Untold Stories Project or Untold Stories Project on YouTube, running Freedom League Dark and the Multiverse of the Master Mage. We are continuing our journey through Mutants and Masterminds Ravenloft, which has been a ton of fun. And next week, I'll be at Origins. So if you are in the Columbus area, I do have some events that still have a couple seats left. If you want to come play a game with me, or you want to come play a game with any of the other wonderful game masters of the Untold Stories Project, including the Deuce and Claude, we will all be there. It's going to be a good time. RC will also be there. So in the meantime, I hope everybody has a wonderful time, has a great, makes some time to play a game for themselves. And remember, you're awesome. You're doing the best you can. And gaming can't happen without you. Bye.